I'm really excited to do this workshop on building your careers in AI and ML. I think it's a very important topic in today's world. Obviously, AI has become the new big buzzword since OpenAI invented ChatGPT, and it's become pretty ubiquitous in terms of where it's used in our work. Um, just a bit of background to kick things off first. So, my name is Arjun, and I am the founder of a startup called Pivot, where basically we help people make smooth and successful career transitions. So, if you're thinking about changing your role, your domain or industry, or maybe even trying to level up your career in the same field, that's where we come in and we specialize in helping you land your target role. We'll talk more about what Pivot does and what we do in the course of this conversation. But for now, I do want to turn it around to the speakers and just quickly introduce themselves, maybe talk a bit about the highlights of your career journey and specifically focus on what got you into AIML as a career. So maybe we will kick things off with Sharmila. Sharmila, do you want to get started?
Sure, Arjun. So, hello everyone. I'm an AI consultant at Google Cloud and primarily work with customers in helping them achieve their business outcome, solving their business use cases using AI ML. So, lot of interesting use cases, lot of complex use cases, lot of niche use cases that you wouldn't have heard about. So, I initially I started my career with data, and eventually I worked as a data scientist. I got an opportunity to work as a data scientist, and finally an AI consultant. Happy to be here, Arjun. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. Thanks so much, Sharmila. Usha, we'll go ahead with you next.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So currently I'm advising for startups, leaner companies who are trying to go into AI or going into where they want to integrate LLMs. So that's what I'm focusing on. And also I'm bringing industry technology partnership for Arizona State University, industry academia partnerships. So besides, I pivoted into AI 7 to 10 years ago, like where I was more focusing on teaching data analytics, there's database, advanced database courses, NoSQL, and web programming. And then I pivoted into AI, building AI student faculty workshops, innovation, and then went into the corporate side of it while I was placing my students for their internships. And that's how I went into the corporate side and absolutely started loving all the work, because it's in the enterprise world, it is totally different how you apply the skills, what you have learned, compared to what you bring in the academia side of it. So since then, I've been in the AI and not looked back.
Amazing. Great. Thank you, Usha. And Ranjani, please go ahead.
Yeah. I started in product, interestingly, and then you get to do different things as part of your role. And one of the things was to look at data to try, interpret, decipher patterns. And that's something I naturally gravitated towards. So I moved into data sciences. I started as IC. I led machine learning teams across enterprise SaaS companies. Currently, I'm the director for AI, working on driving customer outcomes. It's an interesting space, as you called out, Arjun. I enjoy the aspect of leadership plus the technical depth that it offers as well, right? So yeah, that kind of brings me to today, and I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Perfect. Great. So it seems like everybody who's here has had an experience outside of AI/ML careers, because I mean this is a relatively nascent field, even though there's been a lot of research going on for decades and decades. So I think what we would like to really delve into before we start talking about how people should land roles in AI/ML is what are some of the key trends all three of you are seeing today in AI/ML from a career standpoint for people, right? So what I would like to understand is, firstly, Sharmila, we'll kick things off with you. What are some of the key roles in AI/ML that you think people can consider when they are considering a career in this field?
Sure, Arjun. Great question here. So There are technical hands-on engineering roles. So we have ML engineers who could work on developing the solutions. Just like software engineers, we have ML engineers who could build the entire pipeline. So that's one role. We also have data scientists. So data scientists have less hands-on exposure. They primarily concentrate on the exploration, identifying or generating insights, so and presenting it to the business. They do have little bit of domain expertise as well. So that's another role that we see. We also see an MLOps engineer. So just like DevOps, just like DevSecOps, we also have MLOps. So how do you push pipelines to production? How do you build the entire monitoring, evaluation, retraining pipeline? How do you have the CI/CD? So that is the third thing, DevOps. And the fourth thing that I see here is a consultant, AI consultant, very much similar to a data scientist, but AI consultant primarily leads the project, leads the entire solution, and is accountable for the success of that solution, or the project, right? So these are the these are the on ground technical roles that we have here, technical or functional roles that we have here. On top of that, we also have like the techno functional or leadership ML manager roles as well. So that goes up the hierarchy.
Got it. That's helpful to understand, the different kinds of roles. Usha, I wanted to understand from you, like the different roles that, Sharmila has pointed out. I mean, have you come up with some sort of a framework or, some criteria based um, algorithm, so to speak, which
Mhm.
helps people understand what kind of role within AI/ML would be suitable for them. Like if I am a non-technical person, or let's say have some coding background, how do I
Mhm.
determine whether I should be firstly considering an AI/ML career, whether it's the right fit for me, and if so, which role should I go for? How do I make that decision?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I will piggyback on what Sharmila was talking about. But before if most of the on the call, if there are students or if there are job seekers or transitioning into a different path within computer science or software engineering or IT, whichever the background that you are coming from, if you're unsure where to start, whether it is when it comes to AI or data science path, first get that clarity, I would say, like because many would be coming with a strong software engineering such as me, or IT background. So if they are coming with that background, they would you need to find out, whether you're trying to be just a consumer of AI, which is majority of us, or you want to be a builder of AI, where you want to really build things, where you want to get your hands dirty. If that's the case, as Sharmila was mentioning, you would be focusing on coming in as an ML engineer, because there is a fine line between whether you want to be a AML engineer or you want to be a data scientist. Because if it's data scientists, they would be more leaning towards drawing insights from the models that they are creating. Whereas when you're coming in as an AML engineer, you're kind of doing an end-to-end development and deployment of applications. So you need to come up with which is the one that people wants to go, because some will be coming up with a very strong Python background, and they want to pivot into data science side because they have a really strong base. So that once they have that clarity, then they could be able to understand, okay, I'm not looking into just getting the high level of understanding of what the AI is, because there's so much trend that tempts us in order to uh, dab into the Gen AI side of it, knowing about LLM. But unless you know the depth of it and you want to get your hands dirty, definitely be a builder of it, rather be just a consumer of it. Once you know that division, then you could be able to get a clear chart of like, okay, I want to now look for, I've been as a senior software engineer. I want to now look for roles in AML engineering side, because that is like, that is kind of it's a hot role that I would say,
Mhm.
or even in there are many other roles, and also prompt engineering. So they have to come up with that strategy, and then go from there.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. I think that's a interesting way to kind of determine which kind of AI/ML career or even slightly non-technical career within AI/ML people could choose from. So Ranjani, I think you can talk about, your perspective on either of these two things that we just discussed with regard to the different roles or the frameworks that people can use to get into AI/ML on in the most relevant role for them. But the other thing that I also would love for you to cover is, some of the important trends that you are seeing currently shaping up in the industry, which may not have, let's say, cemented yet, but might take, another few months or years, so that people have some visibility into what's really coming. It may not have become the norm, but it might in the next couple of months or years.
Absolutely. So let me answer that in like two parts, right? Um, I've led like data science teams for 10 plus years now, and we've kind of done design to deployment. So as a hiring manager, right, you tend to hire for skills across the stack. So I'll talk to you first of all about the end to end. When we say design to deployment, what are the different things you get to do, and then therefore what kind of roles and what kind of folks do you hire, and what skills should people look out for to get into each of these roles, right? So see, if you broadly look at it, you could have, I'm not even talking about machine learning, I'm talking about analysis itself, right? Solving for problems in itself, which means that these are more business consultants, business analysts per se. They may or may not necessarily be deep learning engineers or data scientists, but you need to work with multiple teams. And you would be surprised as to amount of most of the time when you say data scientist, everyone thinks about, oh, I'll build a model, right? 90% of your time, your job goes in everything else apart from building a model. So I think that is a very key thing where people can work with front end teams, work with stakeholders, understand the problem, try to ask the right questions, get the right data. And that in itself is a big challenge, right? And then do the analysis to be able to solve those problems, to provide answers to those problems. That's one set, right? And if you are a person who, and not everyone does that, not every data scientist will have the skills to be able to do that front ending, right? It takes a unique consultative mindset to be able to do that. So if you're the kind of person, I would highly recommend looking at that kind of roles. It still requires you to understand maybe the fundamentals, right? You would need to be good at SQL, need to be good at Python, but then you're not necessarily doing a production level systems, right? So that's one. As you kind of move down the stack, you would do more of, say, machine learning. You would do, and then you have the ML engineering that Sharmila and others spoke about earlier, right? So that's the end-to-end stack. So as you move further, maybe you do propensity models. You do. We did a lot of NLP in my previous organizations, right? So you tend to have people who are stronger in those skills, and then finally you also need to move these into production. So that's where you interface liaison with the engineering teams, or you'd bring in ML ops or ML engineers in order to put them into production. So basically, if you understand the end-to-end life cycle of what kind of systems work across, you tend to align your rules. And you need everyone, right? Like you wouldn't have a machine learning engineer who's very good at being business analytics, right? So you need to identify where you fall in that bucket and then hone in on your skills broadly. So for that, if I were to come to the second part and talk about framework, you can take any kind of data science problem across. They broadly would fall under three different categories, right? Either you're using analytics, and I'm using the word analytics, right? Not AI or not ML. Generally, you would use analytics to drive decision making, right? So you say that, you know what, we've launched this particular product. I don't know why this is happening. This is, say, the customer is not moving we are not able to upsell, cross sell. There is an opportunity which lies. There's a revenue maximization we can do. So these are all problems your business tends to have in a company, right? So you are using people to help you understand why the problem is happening, take a decision. So that's one. Second set is a production ready systems, right? So these are like, for example, early warning systems, anomaly systems, recommendation engines. So anything, so if you were to go and say, okay, if I have a problem and I'm typing that problem, can I have recommended KB article, a knowledge base article? So those are production ready systems, right? So that is the second category. So decision making, which is more internal facing most of the time, production ready systems, which tend to be more customer facing. That's the second one. The third one, if you see, is driving the product roadmap. And I come from product companies, so I'm going to use product examples, right? So you need to think about, how do I drive? So when you launch a feature, to A/B test it, to experimentation is a huge part of what data scientists do in product companies, right? To run experiments to say, why is this happening the way it is happening? So if I were to, should I include this particular feature? Should I recommend it here? Should I put it there? What happens if I change this, right? So I think that experimentation, and also to guide the product managers in terms of what should you have next on your roadmap, right? Test out the hypothesis. That's the third one. So broadly, if you think about the problems you solve, these are the three categories of problems. So I think it's important to understand that, because where you fit in and your skills depends on the problems we solve. People start in terms of tech tools, but start in terms of problems to solve, and then what tools and tech will augment, right? So I think that's the framework I'd love for people to think about when they think about what roles should I get into. Now, finally, to come to your point around trends, yeah, see, I think here's the thing, right? I think no better time. I call it the pivotal moment. I truly believe that AI today is at a pivotal moment. And it's not about Gen AI or the hype around it. Yes, absolutely. I think there is validity to why there is a hype around this as well. There is always going to be some amount of fluff around it, but there is genuinely, like, it's surprising every time I go to a conference and talk about the value. The value is not in millions, billions, it's in trillions. The economic contribution is in trillions, right? It's growing rapidly. Companies are investing in this at a CAGR, which is double digit, right? It's growing so rapidly across. There is going to be adoption across enterprises, specifically in like sectors like healthcare, diagnostics. I think that's an area which will absolutely change. In terms of what I would also look at in upcoming areas is think deeply in terms of the use cases which will get into value, right? Like personalization. I truly believe personalization is something which will expand, right? Solving outcomes will change. So we are not looking at just building a model or coming up with a particular solution. It's about driving a particular outcome, which is where you would see more of agent-based AI happening, right? So I think all of that will continue to change. And then I also finally believe that AI will accelerate the ancillary technologies, right? So drone technology, autonomous vehicles, cybersecurity, any space where we are using tech that would grow 10x because of AI. So again, it's a topic of passion. I can talk a lot about it, but
Yeah.
I'm going to Arjun, right? I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for that. It's very comprehensive, and I really do like the way you covered the entire skill set in terms of stacking it from starting from the least technical role kind of all the way to the most technical one. And I think it's a good segue, Ranjani, for the next topic that we were going to cover. Sharmila, one of the things that I think we have perhaps covered even previously in one of our workshops, where we were not even talking about AI/ML careers, but people are so interested in AI/ML careers that they just brought up those questions, was mostly in regards with, what are some of the most important skills that people should be considering acquiring or strengthening when they're thinking about AI/ML careers, right? Obviously, it's a fairly broad question because it will depend on what kind of role you're specifically going for. But you can perhaps take any of the two or three most common roles that we have been talking about, right? Whether it's in data science or specific AI/ML, NLP kind of an engineer role. Um, what are some of the most in-demand skills from an employer like, let's say, Google today, when they're looking for right candidates, at entry or mid-level roles when you're joining in AI/ML?
Sure, Arjun. Great question here. So that depends. I mean, the company to which you're applying to. If you're applying to a product-based company, then you would be looking at the domain in which the company operates, right? So it could be a healthcare domain, it could be a BFSI, financial sector, and or retail sector. So based on that, you could relate yourself to the products that are that are applicable in that domain, and then build upon and then see what are the use cases that would be useful. So it is not compulsory that if we go to the traditional ML problem, right? So you need not have the knowledge on the entire suite, right? So you could have had experience in the NLP space, but not on the computer vision space. You could have experience in working with images, but not with videos, or even typical classification regression sort of problems, right? So it's always good to have a knowledge of the entire breadth, but go deep in one or two segments of it. So that is what is expected for ML engineers. Having said that, I would also completely agree with Ranjani, who also mentioned that it's not just the model development that most of the engineers focus on just that, but it is not just the piece of work in case if you want to push things to production, right? So you also have to build the entire pipeline. So having a know-how of that, experience on that, definitely adds value to your resume. So that's how we would look for a ML engineer. For a data scientist, what was the domain that you were working on, and how did you translate a business problem into a technical problem? So how do ML projects usually start? Business comes with a business problem, and they say that, okay, I want my revenue to be increased by this percent, and by building a recommendation engine that's able to do this. So that's probably a business statement. Now, how do you convert it into a technical statement? What are the different approaches that you would suggest, or you would go ahead and try, in case if you're too technical, go ahead and try it, or you would suggest the ML engineers to go ahead and explore? So that's one thing. And also, from for a data scientist, a data analysis exploration capability is also a must that we would be looking forward to. So that is also something that we would look for a data scientist. And for an ML ops engineer, uh, experience on building the entire end-to-end pipeline. What are the different scenarios wherein you had to tweak in the MLOps pipeline? Do you build it for a single, for the entire organization? Do you have just one MLOps pipeline, or do you, or how do you have multiple versions of it for different departments? So thought process, thought leadership in that direction will definitely be a value add for a MLOps engineer.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sharmila. I think there's again, quite a bit to cover there in terms of different types of skills that people can imbibe and bring to the table here. Usha, given your education background, I believe you have been, designing programs as a, faculty member at ASU recently. What I would like to understand is all of these different skills that Sharmila has, pointed out. Um, can you give us an example of perhaps how a person today should think about acquiring or strengthening these skills, right? So let's say, I am trying to break into AI/ML, or another example could be that I'm already in, a starting level of AI/ML career, like as a data scientist or data analytics folk, and I'm thinking about upskilling in the field. So there are different avenues available to me, right? I could potentially go for a full-fledged degree, and especially in a country like US, where the AI/ML is even more advanced. Um, or I could think about online courses. I could also think about working one-on-one with an AI/ML expert if there is somebody who's willing to give their time. Um, and perhaps there are other avenues. So to a person, in, let's say, their 5 to 15-year career mark, anywhere in between, how would you help them make a decision on the right upskilling avenue for them within AI/ML?
Yeah, sure. Yes. If they are in the mid career level where they want to upskill, probably they are tied to a certain company that they are working currently. So what I would suggest is, like, first get the feel of what exactly, whether it's a product company or a service company that they are working for. What is the, get the lay of the land, what exactly their company is doing and where they are moving towards. Probably based off of that, acquiring and upskilling would be better, because no company wants to once again hire, obviously there will be hiring all the time. No matter, the tech layoffs, all those things happen and go. It's these are all like passing clouds. So what I would say is, the workforce development, the companies want to retain, and they want to make sure they can upskill their employees so that they can move them forward, rather bringing every time new talent and train them on. So when you look at that upskilling, you want to make sure first, like, what are the training that's provided within their company, and if they could be able to leverage that. Many companies, for instance, McKinsey on the technology side, they are highly certificate culture oriented. So they want to make sure, like, okay, do you have an AWS certification you have done on this? Probably if you're working as an ML engineer, whether you want to get an ML certification. So they don't force you to do it, but if that is kind of an adding a feather to your cap, which would help you to work on applying the skills in your projects. So that is something that you could look at within your company, so that even if it's getting an exam voucher, getting a certification done, everything will be offered by your company. So you do not have to spend out of your pocket if you're taking it outside. But let's say that since there are so many MOOC platforms, Coursera, EDX, all the different things out there, so you want to make sure, like, you can first audit the courses, whether if this is what you want, and then get a feel of, okay, maybe you want to also get a certificate just to show that you have done this, and also you can apply it, because it's something like, if anything is available for free, it's human tendency, we take it for granted. But if you pay for something, you feel like, okay, I want to put my effort into it and get something out of it. And it's just a human tendency, right? So, and instead of just auditing the courses, and if you feel like you want to take one step further and want to get a certification, probably paying that $49 or whatever that amount is, and then get that certification, so that you feel like certification in the sense, like what I'm mentioning is not the cloud certification, the Coursera, EDX, and all those different MOOC platform certification. When it comes to, you were talking about university side of it, the universities, what they are doing is they partner with industries and bring something called technology training programs, and where with the grant that the universities have, they invite people from different employers and asking them to enroll, where it is also a free of cost. But they need to look for the employees need to look for the job seekers, the people who are in the job trying to transition into a different career or into the AIML career. They need to look into the nearby universities and see, like, what kind of programs that the universities are offering, that you can take it for free. But at the same time, as long as you have a preferably an US address, I'm talking in the US side of it, but even in India that they are doing, where they are connected with Swayam or one of those online platforms, and you could be able to get that what you want to do. It could be a generative AI course or whichever it is, but you will also get a credit. And they also have placement coordinators and career services who try to help you pivot to a different which career that you want to go to, whether it's in the data science path or in the AI path. They help you out. Or you want to
Got it.
be a product leader, you can do
Mhm.
that as well.
Got it. Got it. Great. Thank you for that. I think that should be very helpful for people who are thinking about, considering upskilling in AI/ML. Ranjani, so I think we have covered a lot of ground here in terms of the technical skills that are required in the field today. I think Sharmila covered most of them broadly, in terms of the programming skills or the ML skills and data-oriented deep learning skills, all of these things. So feel free to add your perspective there if you have any. But what I think we haven't really focused on so far, and I know this is a very technical, hard skill oriented sort of a conversation that we've been having. But what about some of the behavioral skills, right? That is one aspect that we haven't really focused on so far. So I would love for you to cover that if possible. What are some of the, I hate the terminology of soft skills, but what are some of the behavioral skills that as humans, non-machine entities, can we showcase at work that will help us work with such a sophisticated technology such as AI?
Yeah. Um, No, that's a very good point, right? See, there's this book called Lynchpin, I highly recommend. So he states a very interesting fact. A job is something you can do when you've been told do A, do B, do C, do D, right? That used to work in the industrial age. In today's time, and especially with where we're going with AI, it is not so clear, right? Like we work in very ambiguous environments where no one can really tell you this is exactly what you need to do. So I think the ones, and that's the difference between a job and art, right? Like the person who's the most valuable, irrespective of whether you know Python or I can list out like a list of 10 different skills, but irrespective of what tool or technology you know, the person who's able to figure out how to get things done is the person who's the most valued in the company, right? And that will remain today, that will remain 10 years down the line. That's a truth, right? So I think that's one thing people should think about, right? How can I solve for things which is not being asked? And I'll put that into perspective a bit more. So I think I was in a recent podcast where we talk about T-shaped skills, right? And I think Sharmila referred to that earlier as well. So you do have breadth of experience, you have depth of experience. I think this person took it a bit further and he called out pie-shaped careers, like pie as in 3.14, right? So if you think about it that way, as you build your skills, make sure you're building it in a very intentional manner. So if I'm hiring, like if I think about hiring, say, a product manager, but a product manager in a very tech firm for like an AI product per se, right? I would not just look for product skills. I would also look at, have they built production ready AI systems, for example? And if I'm from a healthcare background, I also look at, do they have expertise in doing this, but from a healthcare background? So the deeper you have skills and the broader transferable skills, the better you are. So I call it skill stacking, Arjun. So when you are growing, think about what are the skills. So if I am the person who has management skills, who has AI knowledge, who can lead teams constantly, that makes me unique in the market, right? So I think it's important to think about what's a stack of skills that I'm building over time. So highly recommend that. Now, the second point is, see, and this is going to become more and more relevant, right? Like if all I can do is to code in Python, I'm sure there's someone else or something else rather, which can do it cheaper, faster, better. So I think one way to think about it is your critical thinking skills. So when we talk about, I want to cross a bridge, right? More than saying should I build a faster boat, I think the question to ask is what are the different ways in which we should cross a bridge, cross a river, right? Not cross a bridge, cross a river. So you can take a bridge, you can take a boat, but I think people jump into, okay, let's just build a faster boat. So I think asking the right questions, bringing in that critical thinking knowledge, being able to tie the business domain, and someone spoke about that, right? It's so critical to have the business domain knowledge, tying that back into your technical skills and being able to rally people together, influence without authority, drive an outcome. Those are really valid skills, right? And ownership, I tell you, will never go out of style, whether there is AI or no AI. So I think it's important to think about technical skill, but it's important to think about it holistically as well in terms of how you drive value. And that's what I would look for, right? I would not look for the person who's the most smartest or has the most number of certifications. I would look for the person who can take ownership, accountability, and get things done. That's everything else is coachable. Yeah.
Yeah, loud and clear. I think, I mean, that is definitely something that can transcend beyond just AI/ML. I think that would probably be applicable for most careers out there today, to get things done. Um, Rather than people, who are just there sort of executing what they have been told and telling you something is not working. I think that makes so much sense. I mean, now, we have been running a startup for the last about 2 years, right? And when you're building a startup from scratch, or perhaps even in the largest tech organizations, in the world, the ones where you all work at, it's the same thing, right? You want people to make sure that they're not just taking responsibilities as a check the box kind of a thing, right? They need to be able to get things done. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Now I think let's segue into the next most important topic. I believe that most of our audience is going to be interested in today is, there is this dichotomy of job trend or career trends that's happening in the market. In one place, you see, a lot of large tech companies have done a major round of layoffs, right? Obviously the layoffs have happened across different types of roles, not necessarily AI/ML, but they have happened, right? And on the other end, we are seeing, I think it was just in the news recently, I believe it was Microsoft or Google, to be honest, I'm unsure, I should have studied it more deeply, which has just laid off people so that they can marshal more resources to hire more people in AI/ML, right? So it's a very interesting dichotomy you're seeing play out in the market for these large tech companies that are hiring. So, Sharmila, what are some of the things that a job seeker today in AI/ML should do, when they're starting to apply for jobs? So we have covered, skills, we have covered the behaviors people need to be able to be successful in this kind of a role. But let's say because this is a nascent field, a lot of people in the coming years would be applying for AIML jobs, perhaps even for the first time ever, right? Moving on from, let's say, data science to AIML engineer, or deep learning engineer kind of a role. So what are some of the things as a recruiter or as a hiring manager you would be focused on when you are assessing candidates to hire them for such roles?
Sure, sure. Great question here, Arjun. So, one key thing that I would look out for is not the experience of the candidate working in the field, but also the proof that okay, whether the candidate has implemented couple of projects, even if it's a it's a professional who is just entering this field, has about 10 years of experience, whole 10 years in completely different domain, but is willing to enter this in this space, then I would definitely look at some of the works that he has done. So some publications, some blogs, GitHub repositories is definitely something I would look at. And while interviewing the candidate, within just the first 10 minutes, you would be able to understand whether whether the candidate has really coded that, understood that, implemented that from scratch, or whether he has taken a code from somewhere else, copy pasted it, executed it, and just sharing the results. So I would be looking at the journey, that this is where this was a business problem. I translated it into a technical problem. Then this was my first baseline experiment. I got this metrics. From this metrics, I did this to and to increase my final metrics to this number. So I would definitely be looking out for this entire story, not just the final experimentation results. The entire story would prove that yes, this person has really done some experimentation. The thought process: did you try this approach? Did you try this algorithm, this model? Why this? Why not this? What are the pros, cons? What's the theory behind it? So when the candidate tells this story, and when we cross question on these additional aspects, and if the candidate is able to explain it correctly, and not just talk about just the technical terms. So I wouldn't be looking at a candidate who would just talk the technical terms but understand the business as well, right? So he should be that candidate should be capable enough to talk that okay, with the help of these experiments, the business was able to generate this much ROI, this much dollar amount, right? So if the candidate is able to tie that back, right, from business to technical back to business, that is what I would be looking forward to. Because just a techie, just a researcher is not what enterprises look forward to. They would look forward to folks who are able to translate it back to the business outcome. So that's something that I would look out for. And definitely just re-emphasizing what Ranjani said: accountability and ownership, that these are the tasks that I took, and these are the challenges I faced, this is how I did it. So that story is also something that I would look forward to.
Yeah, okay, all right. I think tying to business results again is something that I would say, transcends different careers. I mean, we have seen that play out again and again across different, technical roles or some of the non-technical roles. That there has been this classification of roles for the longest time since corporations started back in the 40s and 50s in US. There are functions and staff functions, right? Line functions are supposed to be your P&L heads that generate the business, and they supposedly drive business for you, right? And then you have the staff functions, which have typically been considered so-called cost centers. Like, HR has always been classified as a cost center, even though today it's much more debatable and arguable that they're driving business. And I think, Sharmila, what you are suggesting is that AI/ML can play a very pivotal role, as Ranjani mentioned, in terms of driving revenues, driving business. So it can be a line function. It doesn't have to be necessarily just an investment or a staff function. Makes a lot of sense. Usha, I have a very specific question for you, which we get quite commonly from Pivots users, right? When they're thinking about building a career in AI/ML or really any deep technical field. Um, Portfolios, right? Proof of work. So this is something that has become more and more common in recent times, where let's say if I'm a data scientist, even a data analytics person, you have websites like Hacker Rank, and there are a couple of others out there which are building the proof of work website for talent in this particular field. So how
Mhm.
important do you think is showcasing your prior experience, achievements, and in case you're breaking into the field for the first time, how do you perhaps build your first ever model or project within this kind of a platform?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So yeah, as Sharmila was talking about, GitHub repo, but if you're just starting in the career, probably, lead code comes with so many challenges. If you want to go into the hardcore coding, then obviously, start taking those challenges with the small, lowest level, and then build upon increasing to medium or difficult levels. So as it's all consistency, I would say. So every day having a little bit of practice about um, doing it in one of these, because it has this digital print. And also once you start doing it, let's say you have enrolled in lead code and you're trying to do these small challenges and acquiring your skills, then you get that confidence. And you at the same time, in parallel, you can look for, okay, if I am focused on, okay, I want to get into meta, just I'm hypothetically saying, then if I want to get into meta, here people are there from Microsoft, Google. So you want to make sure, like, okay, don't just reach out adding just a resume to some random recruiter. Make sure if the recruiter has posted something on LinkedIn or one of the social media, try to reach out to them saying like what that you can offer and what type of digital print that you've already created. And so just a couple of like keeping it concise, but at the same time saying, if I could be able to get a 15 minute information session, say that would help. So that way, the recruiter could reach out like, what is in it that I would like to come back to this candidate and definitely talk about it. So that kind of connection is needed in order to make sure, like, okay, you have created a certain online portfolio, and then you are trying to reach out to get an information session. It not necessarily it has to be a recruiter. It could also be people like Sharmila, Ranjani, who have been in the product space, in the top tech companies, so that they could be able to take some time and talk about it, like what they do in their day to day work, so that that could help them to how they need to hone in and build their portfolio. And that is something that I would mention. And also, as Ranjani was mentioning, like having that both the techno business acumen is very critical. Not only the people in the product space need to have that, like coming with a product leadership. If you're a product manager or a leader, then where they always have the techno. It's no longer a general product manager. It's always you need to have the technology skills as well. That they are mostly like technology product managers. So you want to make sure you have that both that knowledge and have a understanding of the domain knowledge. If you're applying for the healthcare companies or if you're applying for supply chain, what type of project have you done? Even if it's a small self-learning project you have built, add that into your portfolio. It could be on a website, it could be somewhere on the lead code Kaggle, or anywhere that you have built it, or it could be on GitHub repo. Show that. And that is what that's what that they would like to see. And that's what I look at when I'm hiring people also in the junior levels or the mid senior levels.
Got it. Okay. Um, I think you just touched upon a very interesting point that I was curious about, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about that in this room as well, which is so there are different vertical use cases for AI, right? Obviously, and Usha, you just mentioned that, right? Like you have supply chain, or you have, for example, generative AI for content creation, for healthcare, and so many other things, right? So Ranjani, I think maybe we can have a two-part question for you, because I love the way you sort of structure your answers for, kind of unrelated questions at times. But can we talk about how a person, let's say again, considering a career in AI/ML, um, should think about, applying for jobs at different companies which may be doing work in different verticals? Do you think their AI/ML skills are generally transferable across different verticals, or should they try to have a targeted approach towards one or two verticals which may utilize their skill set best. So that's one. And the other thing is, how would you translate all of the experience that you have or the projects that you have tried to build through platforms that Usha and Sharmila were mentioning? How do you translate those into a good interview when you are speaking to a recruiter or a hiring manager? Where sometimes, as Sharmila pointed out, there are times within the first 10 minutes that the candidate has not done the work themselves, or they may have copy pasted things from somewhere. So how, from the other side of the table, as a candidate, would you try to prove to a recruiter that your stuff, what you have done? Yeah.
Sure. And could you remind me the first part of the question? What was
Sure.
your
That
first?
was mostly around basically all of these different verticals that are there in AI today, right? You have healthcare, finance, and so forth.
Mm,
So can a person's skills be transferable across different verticals in AI?
got it. Got it. I'll answer your second part of the question first, right? So, yeah, see, I think one of the things, many a times, right, people reach out and say, okay, how do I learn Gen AI? What should I do, right? I think there's the answer, most of the time, the answer is boring, right? And people just like miracles, but then the answer which will actually take you there is very boring. There's no best course that one can think about except for the course that you actually do. So when we ask for, okay, tell me like a list of things which I need to do, it's always okay to hoard all of those links, but I think the best way to do is to actually go deeper, do things themselves, right? So which means that you actually get your hands dirty, do all the things which Sharmila called out, for example, in terms of getting actual practice, right? um, uh, the key to differentiate yourself is to, for example, read the papers, right? It's always easy to look at clickbaity articles and say, it feels like you're doing busy work, but then the real crux comes in going deeper. So that's one, right? If I have to put it into like a framework again, I would say be that 1% across your candidate experience, right? Like be that 1% candidate, which means that from the moment you build your portfolio, absolutely. If I have to, as a hiring manager, will I look at a static CV or will I look at a portfolio? I will look at a portfolio. So it's like, think about ways in which you can improve your luck surface area, right? If I constantly put things out there in terms of blogs, in terms of articles, build my portfolio, build my repo, there are two things I'm doing. One, A, I'm learning. B, I'm giving people a chance to discover me. And it's important to do that because looking for a job isn't something you do only when you're desperate to do. That's something you need to continue to improve over a period of time, right? So I think that building that portfolio is a long game. Second thing is, see, you could have students, you could have people who are working in organizations. It's very important to get real life skills. Nothing beats that, right? So I would highly recommend shadowing things beyond your day job. If you're looking at pivoting into a career in data sciences, for example, shadow rules, talk to people who are actually doing that to say, what do you do in your day job, right? And that happens by giving before taking, Arjun. Like most of the time we start with what's in it for me. I would say give first, right? Like, okay, can I volunteer for this? Can I help you out on this? Like I've had software engineers who are really good who would come and say, I'll help you with the best practices. Can you help me understand how would you go about a data science project, right? So it's a very mutually gainful reaction. Three, network, right? And when I say network, it's not just about pinging people. And I know that's one thing, like Usha's point is very valid. When you reach out to people, no one owes you anything. Absolutely no one owes you anything. So when you reach out, make it easy for them to help you, right? Give them a context of why, what, how. This is why I think. And 9 out of 10, I would refer them if they have put in that homework upfront, right? So I think it's important to do that homework. And networking is not just that. You can attend meetups, you can be part of communities. There's so much of good work which is going out there, like in Reddit communities, for example. So I think it's important to just, after a period of time, Arjun, what happens is it's like pieces of the puzzle, right? It all starts fitting in. And you need to get to that point. It's going to be uncomfortable, but uncomfortable is the given. That's how you have to go through the learning process, right? And finally, it's about, like I keep saying, right, be that 1%. So when you look at a CV, within the first 5-10 seconds, you can see whether they've put in that effort, right? Like the small things which you would do differently differently. Like, it's very easy to say I'm a results driven innovative person. Like, that's very generic, right? What puts you different? Like, I think be very specific about the impact you're driving. So from the point where you're putting your CV, going and asking for reference, building a portfolio, putting yourself out there, to finding jobs and then getting hired, it's all of that is a process, right? And you need to be 1% in everything. You'd be surprised, Arjun, the number of times I talk to people and they'll say, how long did you prepare for this interview? I'll say, oh, I looked at it. No, you don't look at it. You prepare for hours for interviews, right? Now, those are very transferable things. You may not get that job, but you will leave an impression and they will come back to you when they do have a role, right? That's always happens. And more important than not, you are learning through that process. So even today, I would put in like 4-5 hours for every single round and every single company I interview, right? And it's not about vanity. I'm genuinely telling you that there's nothing which beats hard work, right? So I think that's the diligence I would love for people to do end to end, right? Now, to your second part around transferable skills. Yeah, see, nothing can beat experience. Like, if there's a person who comes from like healthcare, for example, and says they have done this work, there's nothing that beats that, right? Like, they'll definitely be better at that than you. But does it mean that you don't apply? I always believe that people who have 60-70% of the qualification should apply, right? Like, never 100%. If you're applying at 100%, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're not going to push yourself in that role, right? And most of the time, companies are okay with it because you know that you will have to ramp up in certain parts. Now, about transferable skills, see, it's very important to understand the type of company and role you're applying for. Now, there would be startups which require very different skills from enterprises, from services companies, from consulting companies. Everyone would call it a data scientist, but they're very different data scientists, right? So think about whether the skills are at depth or breadth. So if you're having like a startup, for example, they would go in depth in one area, like computer vision or NLP, language models. There you need depth. There I can't go and say, I'm a generic data scientist, I'll work over here. No, they'll not. You need to be at depth, right? You need to maybe have PhD level information. But you would also have companies which are broader, right? Like enterprise companies which work on broader use cases. So it's when you talk about transferable skills, you need to think about where is my transferable skills going to apply, right? So if I am coming to a healthcare, like a big company, like for example, GSK, right? And then I'm applying for a role over there. You may not necessarily have a healthcare PhD, but you'll still be okay with it, right? Especially versus getting into a research firm, AI research firm within GSK itself. So I think it's very key to understand what is the roles and companies and applying, what is the breadth of data science experience they would have, and where will I fit in? Will I fit in into one slot or will I have to do broader? I think that's the way to think about transferable skills, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely it does. Thank you for covering that. We don't have a lot of time left, and actually, we just started getting a few questions from the audience here. So I do want to quickly cover them before we wrap up. So, there was one question earlier in the session from Likith, and I think, Sharmila, I believe this might have something to do with what you had shared in one of your earlier snippets there. Likith's question was more around, when you're targeting an AI role. Um, is it better to have an ML exposure? Does it help you in terms of landing an AI specific like engineering role to have machine learning experience beforehand?
Having that experience or exposure does give a upper hand here while applying to the AI rules. But having said that, the industry is open to folks like I mentioned earlier who have some proven record of that publishing or working or experimenting on it. So that is also perfectly acceptable. Even if it's not GitHub repo, it could be some Medium article, it could be a LinkedIn post, but some thought process around that would also be a great starting point to firstly get started with.
Got it. Okay, great. I think Likith is here in the room. So Likith, I hope that answered your question. Feel free to share any follow-up questions in the chat if you have. Um, and yes, I think Usha, with regard to Saurabh's question, I think that would be a good one for you. Given that you have worked at McKinsey, which is more of a consulting firm, slightly outside of the typical tech landscape that we consider. So Saurabh has 18 years of work in Oracle enterprise resource planning, finance functional area, right? Which obviously is technical in nature, but not necessarily something which has focused on AI/ML. So if he wants to move towards an AI ML career, what are some of the things he should be thinking about?
Yes, yeah. So see, coming with that ERP finance itself, it's such a great asset. So people want to see like that such strong finance data background. So many AI applications today, they focus on fraud detection. We need to forecast, automated forecasting needs to be done. There is some anomaly detection that we need to look for. So all those things, he would have already have that knowledge. So applying that to be more into going into the AML engineering side of it, because he already have the data background. So as a data come AML engineer, many companies kind of take people who are coming with strong data background, data engineering background. So pivoting into the AML engineering would, if he wants to focus in that line, in the AML side of it. So definitely going in that would really help him combining his ERP knowledge. And maybe, starting with working on projects. And as Ranjani was mentioning, if since he is already in Oracle, probably shadowing in the AI group, AML group, where he could volunteer for some project. There are always some innovation accelerators within the company where they would be doing some early experimentation. He could be able to volunteer for and work on that innovation project. And also there are outside or even within the corporate, there are some organization wide hackathons he can participate in, and there are open source projects that you can contribute to. So because in that open source project, as both Ranjani and Sharmila was mentioning, you will come with also the business side of it, that you could be able to give the knowledge, because always these hackathons happen in a group setting. So you could be also be able to leverage that your finance skills if you're building something as a prototype, and also be able to learn by gaining some practical experience from that. So these are all the things that would help him not only showcase his skills and also get that visibility within the organization, so he can gradually move into, if he wants to move into the AML group.
Perfect. Very practical insights, Susha. I think those are
Mhm.
things that sort of I hope you heard and would be able to take away from this session. I think some of the things like working on a project within your current organization is a low-hanging fruit relative to other efforts. Should be definitely considered strongly. Ranjani, I would love for you to take up Anurag's questions there in the chat section, but the first question was, which is mostly focused on, should we be building more depth or breadth in our early careers in, let's say, engineering or AI/ML. I think you did broadly mention about that pie-shaped, skill set to develop. Do you think that is applicable even for folks in their early, let's say, first 5, 7 years of their career?
Yeah. Yeah, I think see, I call it T-shaped, pie-shaped, yeah, but I think the premise still holds, right? And I'll tell you why. So say you're a data engineer, you join as a data engineer, right? And you go deep in terms of, oh, I learned how to build pipelines, I learned the different technology, which helps me do that. Now, I may do that, and that's very important to do, by the way, right? Skimming at the surface doesn't help. You need to build that. But I think it's also important for you to think broader, and especially as ICs, right? One thing I've noticed is individual contributors who grow really fast are the ones who just don't look at what they're doing. They also look at what, where the context around it, right? Where is this getting used? How is it getting used? Why am I asked this question? I know it's not part of your job description, but I would highly recommend people are intentional about learning that, which means that I go broader, which means that I understand, okay, is this something which happens only in this particular segment? How can I make it scalable? How can I make it repeatable? What are data products? Now, that is like slightly ancillary to data engineering, but that's still important, right? So I think it's that toggling between depth and breadth is important. So I can't. That's a very good question, by the way. When you start off, right, you need to do both, in the sense that you need to build depth in one particular area, but also understand slightly broader, like being able to connect the dots becomes very important as you grow, right? So I think that toggling is very important to do. Now, in terms of what will remain constant, right? I think, and I did touch upon that also. What will remain constant is definitely your critical thinking and all of that. But then, if I have to kind of add to that, right? see, understand the fundamentals, like understand at a very fundamental first principle levels how things work, right? And it's important to do so. Even like, for example, even in like AIML, right now, everything one is talking about Gen AI is the craze. Understand at a very fundamental level how do LLMs work? What does it mean at a vector level, right? And it doesn't need to be very technical. Like if you really go down and deconstruct it, no, you'll understand it conceptually. So there's just so much of really good content out there, right? So I think that's important to go down and learn your fundamentals so that you can then have an informed say. Now, if you think about technical levels, there are 100, 200, 300, 400. You may not be level 400 in everything, right? And it's not feasible. But I would highly recommend you are 200, 300 at least in terms of most of the areas where you understand the fundamentals, and what you don't know you can always pick up and learn, right? So what will remain constant is technologies and tools will change, right? Like but understanding the fundamentals of coding, like you may get the code already, but to know what should I prompt for, how do I ask the question, what question to ask, is still something you need to learn. So that critical thinking, understanding the fundamentals, being able to connect the dots, the ownership, accountability, all of those will continue to remain constant, right? And so that is something I would highly recommend. Get that business understanding. And I can't stress that enough. It is not about just the technical skills, but in what context, what problem of the business am I solving, right? If I do this, am I solving for latency? Am I solving for adoption? Am I solving for turnaround time? Most of the time we start with how, start with why. Why am I doing this? And then how am I doing it, right? So I think those are the things which will remain constant.
Perfect. Great. Um, all right. I think with that, we will start to wrap up the session because I think we have already gone slightly over our time. And I mean, I really want to thank everybody who joined us again on a Friday evening. It shows really that everybody is committed towards building their careers in AIML. Really appreciate that. And special thanks to all three speakers, Ranjani, Sharmila, Usha. Thank you so, so much for making time for this. I think the depth of insights that we covered today within a relatively short session was paramount, was very high, and I think that just goes on to show the kind of quality of experts or speakers that we partner with typically at Pivot. So really appreciate that. Any final thoughts that any of you want to share, feel free to chime in. Sharmila, Usha, or Ranjani, before we wrap up, just one final thought if you want to share with the audience here. Sharmila, you want to
One
go
thing I would
first?
like to,
Or
oh,
Usha, yeah,
Sharmila,
please,
come.
please. No,
Yeah,
Usha, go
please go.
ahead.
Okay. Yeah. One thing I want to add is like, as Ranjani was mentioning about, if there are 10 skills, unless all the skills match, many women today, they don't apply for the jobs. And they want to see like, only if all the 10 in that list item is checked in, they don't want to apply. And I've seen that when I went to like conferences like Grace Hopper conference, they had such wonderful portfolio, but they hesitate to apply for better roles rather sticking to what they were working on. So that is something I would encourage whoever is here in the room, all women folks, and come out of your you are already came out of your comfort zone, but make sure that you do not have to check all the skills. As long as you feel like if you have that confidence, you can be able to do it. Just apply for it and then find the results, what it will be.
Very helpful, Usha. I think that was a point worth reiterating that I believe Ranjani also had mentioned earlier. Do think about applying for roles where you may not meet every requirement, because ultimately most people want to aspire for something more than where they are today. That's the biggest driver of our motivation. So thank you for reiterating that, Usha. Sharmila, anything that you would like to share as a final thought?
2024 is going to be super interesting. It's going to be a year full of innovations, full of surprises, and full of hype news. Just keep that inspiration, just keep up that motivation, and then happy learning, continue learning. It's going to be a interesting journey. You will definitely achieve your goal. It's going to be super interesting. All the best to
Great,
everyone.
great. Thank you. Ranjani, we'll wrap up with you.
Yeah, no, it's to reiterate what Sharmila said, such a great time to be alive. Especially, I'm like very jealous of people who are just coming out of colleges at this point in time, right? It's just so much of exciting future ahead of you. Um, I'm just going to reiterate what I said earlier, right? I think it's very critical to target being that 1%. always, and no one can define that for you, right? You need to ask yourself, what can I do better in any situation you take up, any upskilling, any learning, or any applying to rules, or anything which you do in life in fact, right? How can I be that one person? That's like 99% of the time who will try to do the same thing. That's the only way you can stand apart. And so target to be the one person is the only thing I've seen. And that shows, right? The fact that you're like here on a Friday evening. So good luck. Good luck to all of you folks.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll wrap up with that. And just one final thought from me is that in case you're looking to work directly with folks like Sharmila, Usha, and Ranjani, do check out our website, which I have shared the link for in our chat. It's mypivot.work. We provide one-on-one guidance and mentoring for people who are looking to break into new career fields like AI/ML. So in case you're one of them, do check it out. But that's all for today. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you found the session insightful. Happy weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.